Hey folks, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
I may be like all up in my 20s, right? In my mid 20s. This is Amitabh Bachchan, possibly the most famous man in the world. And I go into his room and it's him and me. And suddenly it seems like I have the power because I am going to be asking the questions. It's, while it's an unequal relationship otherwise, it suddenly becomes an equal relationship because it's a conversation where I am interested in listening to that person.
Hey everyone, my name is Himanshu, and this is the Love of Cinema podcast. Imagine you're a relatively new film journalist, and you have landed an opportunity to interview one of the biggest stars. When you walk inside that room, where you'll come face to face with the star, who would you say holds the power? You, the rookie, or the massive star you're about to interview? Our guest today, who knows a thing or two about interviewing some of the biggest names from the entertainment industry, says it's always the rookie, not the star, who holds the power. We'll find out more about exactly what he means by that and why he thinks so. There are a few good interview shows around. One of my favorites when it comes to Hindi cinema is Sit with Hit List, hosted by Mayank Shekhar. You'll hear more shortly on why I like this show, but let me just say that I, personally, find the interviews on this show the most organic, which is also our goal here on this podcast, where our aim is to have organic, discerning conversations around cinema and all things cinema. I thought it would be great to pick Mayank's brain on his approach towards conducting interviews. Mayank has been covering films and reviewing films for more than 15 years. Film journalist, film critic, author, content creator, he's done it all. Recipient of the prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award for his work in films and television journalism. He currently runs entertainment at Midday. He joined me on this episode to talk about the craft of the interview, print versus video, the changing landscape of the business of covering films, the state of film criticism, and the tricky song and dance with the celeb PR machinery. An interview with Spielberg or an interview with Deepak Tizori? Which one would you pick? We agreed that although both would make for great interviews, perhaps the more interesting one would be the one with Tizori. Why? Stick around, you'll find out soon. The business which Mayank's in has changed much over the course of the last decade or so. Being an industry veteran, he was able to share the lowdown as well as the bird's eye view. If, like me, you're fascinated by all things films, you don't want to miss this episode. Here goes. I've been a long-time reader and I love your interview show, and I'm just glad I'm getting this chance to chat with you today. Would love to pick your brain.
I've been following your Twitter handle for a while too, and I get to learn a lot. So
wow.
Hear your voice as well.
Thanks a lot. So, Mike, let me start out by asking you about conducting interviews. Now, I've seen all of your Sit with Hit List conversations, and I really like them. And I wanted to pick your brain on your process and your approach towards these interviews. And I'll tell you what I'm trying to get out from this. I would love to learn from you, what would you say is your primary goal when you sit down with your subjects? And how do you go about rating yourself at the end of each interview and so forth? If you could talk a little bit about that, that would be nice.
Sure. That's a great question. I think usually you don't end up talking about what would be, quote unquote, the art or the craft of a conversation. But the conversation is really the bedrock of all journalism, whether it's political, whether it's entertainment or show business or or business or any kind of sports. And effectively, I think what it entails, and I don't want to sound like some sort of a journalism class, but it effectively entails a situation where the person you're speaking to, you're deeply interested in, you're curious about, you want to hear them out, and you would hope that they open up. Now, when you do, and I've done a lot more print interviews than I've done on video. Now, when you do print interviews, it's a lot easier because they're not, you know, in front of a device. A camera automatically turns us all into posers and actors. Whereas if you're just hanging out with somebody in the car, you take a walk with them, or you're just chilling with them in a drawing room, there's a lot more freedom that you find the person in that space to be in. And therefore, they end up opening up a lot more, to a point that they sometimes get rattled when they actually read what they said on print. Because a lot of things that we say, you don't understand the impact of it until you actually read it or it's read back to you. With When you're recording an interview, whether it's a podcast as you're doing, Himanshu, or for that matter, before camera, I think what I would prefer, even in that situation, is to somehow get the person to be at ease, to be able to reveal themselves in ways that they've not done before. And I think one of the ways that I've found that seems to have worked for me a few times, at least the ones that I think may have been better interviews than others, is not to sit with a piece of paper and not to make it seem like the person next to you is necessarily an element very outside of what any other person would have been. So the way you and I, if we met for a drink, how we would chat, I would hope that any other conversation or interview goes off in the same format, where everyone else, either if they're in the room, if it's a live interview, or if they're watching it on video, they're actually simply taking a peek into that person's life, where that person is opening up to a friend. So it's almost like being in a coffee shop where you're kind of overhearing someone else talking next to you, except that they don't mind it. They don't mind you doing it, and they're allowed. They're perfectly fine with them, with those people actually staring at you.
So I guess you're saying that the key is to be casual and kind of go the unstaged way as far as possible, correct?
As far as possible, yes. Also because I do interviews with people in popular culture, right? There was a time back in the day, I think about 10 years ago, or perhaps a little more than that. I was commissioned to do a show along the lines of Karan Thapar's Devil's Advocate with people in Bollywood, okay? Which is supposed to be adversarial, where, you ask pointed questions, and those replies should have a counter reply, etc., etc. And it did not work at all. I mean, I felt uncomfortable beyond a point in any case, but also it didn't work for the viewer, primarily because these are guys who don't owe you anything. These are not politicians. You did not elect them into power. You're not speaking truth to power in that typical sense as a political journalist would, or I think should. So there has to be an element of really try to understand them in terms of what their belief systems are, what their value systems are, what their life's been like, and of course decode their craft, the art, the reason why we're talking to them, because we find them incredibly talented. Also, the reason why we're talking to them is because we love their stories, and one hopes that these would be stories that we haven't heard before.
And how would you go about rating yourself at the end of each interview? Like, is there something that you think, okay, I was able to do this, so I thought the interview went well, or you have a mental checklist?
I think, as an interviewer, I would be the first listener of that conversation. And once that interview is over, and here, of course, video and print doesn't matter. When I'm going home, or there's a whole day ahead, if things that were said to me still stick in my mind, if it's changed my perspective about either the person or certain viewpoints I held on certain issues that we spoke about, or I learned something new, and that I can distinctly remember and perhaps even talk about over a drink with a friend in the evening, then I know that the interview has gone off really well. And that tends to happen very often when you actually meet someone for longer form interviews rather than soundbite journalism, where you wanted a particular answer, you asked that question, you may or may not be, you may not agree with the answer, or may feel that they did not answer well. But that's not interviewing in that sense. That's more trying to look for one answer, or try to probe one particular question. But I think the long form ones, where you're actually sitting and chatting with someone who in most cases, the reason why you're meeting them is because you think they have a great story to tell, or you deeply admire them in the first place. most of them actually change your perspective in some form, and I think that they should, and that to me would be a good interview.
Right, right. Because I'm thinking, like, I know you have done interviews with big stars, and you have also done interviews with directors. And I remember you, I don't think this was a video interview, but I remember reading one of your columns where you spoke with Ram Gopal Verma. And I'm imagining that that interview would be a lot different than, speaking with Akshay Kumar or Tabu or somebody like that. And so the whole kind of, the spectrum of questions or how it's going to lead its way, it's going to
No,
be
I
entirely
think
different.
Ramu is by far one of the best people to interview. Not because necessarily because you only talk about films, and there are enough films of his to talk about. Even if you may or may not love his current body of work, but he's quite a maverick, quite a game changer in his own right. That apart, I think he's a phenomenally fun human being who doesn't take himself seriously, who enjoys attention like very few people that you will meet, and he's extremely generous with sharing. Including sharing drinks and sharing time with you, and like taking you to his office and chilling with you. And I really miss the time, all the time that I spent with Ramu. Of course, I don't get to meet him as often now, but I think he would rank as one of the most fun people that I got to meet in Bombay and continue to meet over a period of time. Of course, we haven't in a long time, but again, that is much easier to do when you're doing a print interview because you're just chilling with them, and and a lot of it can actually become color for your copy. Now, when you switch on a light, unless you're doing a documentary film on Ramun, that will not show. And so I mean. Which is not to say that he wouldn't he wouldn't give great sound bites if you switch on the camera too. But I think that he's a phenomenally fun guy to hang with, and that becomes a huge advantage, especially when we sort of seek out such people anyway. That becomes a huge advantage, because then you can take him to various directions in terms of conversations, and what comes out is a great copy.
Right, right. And this kind of personality, I'm guessing it's also going to be more open and candid about their, answers.
Yes, absolutely. I think the problem with someone being hugely successful and thereafter taking themselves extremely seriously, and taking their success very seriously. And why should you not? Also, because a lot of things that you say can be twisted, and the whole time that you spend being interviewed becomes a series of various other interviews you need to give in order to defend what you said and stuff like that. But at the moment people start playing extremely safe, they tend to get extremely boring as well. But thankfully, I haven't done that many boring interviews. By and large, people have been a lot of fun, and they've been quite generous with sharing information about their lives, their craft, and anecdotes. I think anecdotes really make an interview what they should be.
I guess what I'm hearing from you is that, when the person doesn't give a damn, it becomes a much bigger, becomes a much more interesting interview. And if there's any person that doesn't give a damn, it must be Ramu. So I'm guessing that's going to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed with your show, Mayank, is that all of your guests seem to drop their guard at some point of time. And that really makes it a great interview. And I was wondering how you go about that. What's the secret behind that?
Well, Himanshu, and correct me if I'm sounding too pompous, but I speak for a whole profession. I think journalists have a certain superpower, and that superpower is something they can harness if they just stick to exactly what the job is, which is to be a very good listener. And in a world where everyone wants to be heard and very few people actually want to do the listening, it's surprising where you can find yourself in situations, and I have in a lot of cases, especially with print interviews. And of course, I've not mentioned it because it would be unfair to the person, but they burst out crying, for instance, because they started thinking about a particular incident in their life that they'd probably not touched before, or certainly not done it with a stranger, even forgotten for a while because the conversation was going on for some time, that this is actually an interview. And of course, one has to be very sensitive about it too, and then, go back to them and ask them about if it's okay to print. And of course, you don't if they're not comfortable with it. But I think in a situation where, let's say, I'll give you an example of Amitabh Bachchan, right? This is, if I'm not mistaken, 2006. I think 2005 or 2006, 1 or 2 years. It's very easily Googleable. Is when he had a huge health scare, and he was at Leelavati for a very long time. And right before he was, I don't know, he sent me a message. I can't remember exactly what. Of course, I'd sent him a message to check on how he's doing, and then like past midnight, he sent a message, something to the effect of, I didn't understand what the line was, and eventually when he got okay is when I got in touch with him. We decided to do a long form interview. And of course, I asked him about what that was, and it triggered something, etc., etc. But the fact is, I may be like all of in my 20s, right? In my mid 20s. This is Amitabh Bachchan, possibly the most famous man in the world. And I go into his room, and it's him and me. And suddenly it seems like I have the power because I am going to be asking the questions. It's, while it's an unequal relationship otherwise, it suddenly becomes an equal relationship because it's a conversation where I am interested in listening to that person. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it sounds a lot like being a psychologist or a counselor at some level, because that's what counselors, therapists will do, right? They actually listen to you, and that in itself is so therapeutic that it's good enough. So I think the key might well be to be deeply interested, and to be extremely curious. And I think and I don't need to just necessarily bracket this or box this into how journalism should be. That's how I think we should be as people, in a conversation too. And it's bizarre how often people open up and say the craziest things to strangers, especially when they find that the other person is deeply interested. And it could be at a bar, it could be on a flight, it could be it could be just at at a lobby somewhere, or it could be like a date, and perhaps the first time you're meeting that person. But I think if you show interest, people really do open up.
Interesting. I see. So what you're saying is, yeah. So it's almost therapeutic, like you said. And if you show a tendency to listen, they will talk and they will open up. So it's important that you kind of project that, at least, in a sense where you can make that person comfortable, and so that they can really talk about something and open themselves up.
True. And also, I think, if I may add here, and this might be for younger listeners or younger journalists. Again, I don't want to sound like a journalism class, but what the hell? Since you're asking that question, I think also not to be deeply in awe of the person. Of course, they're far more accomplished than you are. Of course, they're far more talented than you are. Perhaps they're much older than you are too. But if you let that awe come in the way of that conversation, then I think it puts off the other person too. Somewhere you need to somehow build a modicum of equality, because that's the only way two people can talk to each other, when it's equal. And to do that, I guess you'll have to just feel like somebody with a superpower, and for that moment, a really good listener and a deeply interested person, and with a lot of things to learn from, and therefore to say exactly what you feel, rather than like fumbling or asking stuff like, oh, how are you feeling, and I'm so glad to see you here, and I'm such a huge fan. I'm sure, which is not to say that you should, if that's how you feel, you should make that known, but you should not let that fandom interfere with what could have been an extremely illuminating conversation for a third person who's listening in.
Right. But Mike, it must be tough checking in your fandom at the door, especially when you're going to go in and interview someone like Bachchan for the very first time, or say, so even second time.
Um,
How do you do that?
I guess you just have to, knowing that it's part of your profession. And I think if you stay in the profession for long enough, then novelty wears off too. So it becomes a lot easier with age and time. Initially, sure. The first time I met Bachchan, which is a long story, and maybe we can get into it at some other podcast and some other time, which is a crazy story of its own. But the fact is that he pulled me out from across the street into his house. And then served me thandai, and I'm like, is this really happening to me? And my knees were rattling, and I didn't even know what weak need meant in a real sense. So of course that's going to happen to you initially, for sure. So you may have to really curb your enthusiasm in the beginning, without doubt. But I think with due course of time, one gets better at it. and one starts treating it as purely a profession, and therefore I'm a journalist, and that's my subject, the person I'm supposed to interview. It doesn't matter if it's a Nobel laureate, it's Amartya Sen, or if it's Amitabh Bachchan, But there are things I want to know also for myself, but far more for the number of people who are reading this or who are watching this, and I'll be doing this service by letting all my freaking crazy fandom interfere with my job.
I think this is something that really young journalists, like you said, can learn from. Now, you have been covering films for more than a decade, is that right?
Yeah. Much more than a decade, almost a decade and a half plus. Yeah.
Okay, for more than 15 years, right.
Yeah.
Now, you have seen this business, of covering films change in front of your eyes, right? I mean, it has gone through a sea change, and you can, you know this better than I do. But we also know that, how today almost every step in a star's public life is sort of strategized, orchestrated by a big PR company or an agent. And there is this kind of an encapsulation of these, PR machinery that's taking over. And has that affected the business of writing on films, covering films? And because I'm thinking it must be difficult to go about your business without being sucked into to become a part, consciously or indirectly, of this massive PR business. How do you guard against that?
Well, true. I think it. So we've gone from one extreme to the other, right? So there was this whole generation before mine. So just to give you a slight brief background, Himanshu. So I've had a couple of parallel careers within journalism itself. So one element of it is being an editor, newspaper editor. So I would look into the show business side of it as an editor, where it's a team. There's this product we come out with on a daily basis. So it started with Midday, then three of us moved out there. From there, we started Mumbai Mirror. Then I went to HT, where I was the national cultural editor, and then I'm back in Midday, where I had entertainment coverage. Right. So there, you're looking at also aspects which is outside of your own work, which would be the writing part of it, or perhaps even the individual editing part of it, because there is a machinery that you're up against. There is a machinery that you have to interact with, because they sort of they form that big wall, wall of China between journalism and the business, or show business, as it were, or entertainment business, as it were, film industry, as one calls it more often, right? So there is a lot of negotiating that one needs to do to ensure that your stories are accurate, that you have your quotes in place, and all those things. And there, there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that the PR machinery works for you in order to make your job easier, right? So there is that aspect, which was very different in the generation before mine, actually, because back in the day, these are the stories I hear about how close journalists used to be to, say, the film stars themselves or the big directors, and they would be whining and dining, and pretty much they were the same fraternity. And there was a whole lot of embedded journalism that used to take place, which was great in terms of access, because at least the readers got to know a lot more, because it was almost coming from an insider, right? To a point now where practically everyone is an outsider, because the access is being controlled by an agency, and I might still be in that cusp between the previous and the one after, because I have actually worked with these people on an individual basis, on a personal basis, so I may still be able to text someone and get that news out or get that information out and things like that, or get an interview without quite having to go through a PR agent. But the younger ones are finding it more and more difficult. And of course, a lot of it has to do with the explosion in the media scene. So, there were few magazines that used to cover entertainment back in the day, in the generation before mine. The mainstream press was absolutely not interested. There was nothing to do with film. So, you basically coverage of cinema, and I mean coverage. We've never really covered cinema in real sense forever, but I mean like fanzines or coverage of, for fans of cinema, or fans of cinema stars, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they were all, salon magazines that, when we went for a haircut is where you found those magazines.
More about gossip,
right? And a lot of gossip and stuff like that, which was all coming from really almost the horse's mouth, right? But now when you have that many websites and that many newspapers and mainstream, media's interest, at least mainstream newspapers' interest in cinema or show business, as it were, is as high as Stardust, interest used to be, or a film fair's interest used to be. So there's a whole lot of newspapers, websites, of course, a whole lot of TV channels, a whole lot of web portals doing videos, etc., etc. So clearly, you need some sort of like a filter between the star or between the talent who needs to really do their real job too, in order to be relevant enough for anyone to be interested in them, and the plethora of media that surrounds them. So that is kind of cut off the access to a huge extent, to a point where you don't know what to believe anymore. And that might well be true not just for show business, that might well be true for politics too, and various other facets of life that we read about from the press. So yeah, that's really the big change that's taken place. And I'm not going to deny it's not easy to negotiate this space. And it's also deeply competitive.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong in that big PR machinery. I mean, they're just doing their job, and that's just order of the day. But like you said, they have also become the gatekeepers in terms of the access and how you would approach. And it's just a new song and dance that everybody has to learn to and get good at.
I agree. I mean, that is the order of the day, and it's not going to change. If anything, it's going to get worse. And whenever I cover anything abroad in the US, or doing stuff for Netflix, interviews for Netflix and things like that, I find that they are at least 10 years ahead in terms of the same graph. I mean, I recently met Ben Affleck, and we were what, five of us, six of us. We got 3 minutes. You know what I mean? So I mean, thankfully, we don't have to go through that here yet, but we might be getting there. But that's going to be the nature that at the same time, I think if you're really good at what you do, and that may be true for any field, it will become easier for you to break the rules, the set rules, as it were. So so while there is that whole gatekeeping that happens in the American media too, or the British media, and those stars that are at another galaxy altogether. But let's say if say Tom Cruise wants an interview done, or well, Rolling Stone wants to do an interview with Tom Cruise, then Tom Cruise decides that Neil Strauss should interview him, which is not to say that Neil Strauss will write a puff piece, but he just likes reading Neil Strauss. So he will ask for Neil Strauss, and of course Neil Strauss is one of my favorite writers, by the way, and he would be very happy to do it. So I think there is still a lot of space to shine, even for the younger lot, because their work will get appreciated if they don't just please the machinery, if they just don't do a 1.5 minute soundbite thing to again please the machinery, or be a muckraker for the heck of it sometimes. But take that job seriously. I think the showbiz aspect of it will follow. I think they will take you seriously too.
If you're good at your job, you're gonna somehow or another, you're gonna simmer up to the top. And once you do that, the rules will kind of change a little bit for you. But it's also about, like you said, good old relationship building, like with Cruz and Strauss. So if they really trust
Well,
you, and
again, no, I think I want to make this clear. It's not so much about building relationship, because that's being somebody's chamcha, and that will get you no respect. You'll have to write what the other person wants. I think if Tom Cruise is a fan of Neil Strauss's writing, and Neil Strauss, does not write puff pieces, and he would like a really good profile that looks at him from a 360-degree, overview, in the same way that, say, Steve Jobs asked for Walter Isaacson. In fact, he pursued him over a period of time, so Walter Isaacson could write Steve Jobs' biography. And of course, it's not a puff piece. I mean, he's bajao the hell out of Steve Jobs when he needs to. But you want a good writer to profile you, and I think that's what I mean. Rather than building relationship in that old old world ways of whining and dining and being someone's friends, and therefore becoming someone's spokesperson.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, yeah. What I meant
Mm.
by a building relationship is more about a love-hate relationship than like
Right, right,
because
right.
it's there are going to be times when you're going to write or you're going to say something about the person that is going to piss them off, but that's going to be part and parcel of the game.
And so long as they understand that there's nothing personal in the sense that you're not, it's not a vitriol, it's not a direct attack on. It's a lot of times it's not vindictive at all. Yeah, I think that, and if it's not, then I think that the person in due course of time will understand that anyway.
That's a great segue for us to talk about the next topic that I wanted to
Mm,
chat with you about, and that's about film critique and
mm,
analysis.
mm,
Now, today, there are many good critics writing in English today in India, but there is also, I get a feeling, a lot of fluff level critique and analysis. And, some people joke that if everything else failed, you could be a food critic, and now it's pretty much a film critic.
sure.
How would you rate film critique in India today in terms of the quality, the know-how of the cinema, and just because everybody like myself can open up a Twitter account and start talking about films.
Well, I think, and there's nothing wrong with you opening a Twitter account and talking about films. As I said, I learn a lot from it, and please continue to. Um, See, there is. I'll give you a brief background in terms of how it all started, or at least from the years that I've been a movie critic, which is roughly around 2003, 2004. And back then, we used to have a screening, a press show, usually in town. In town, when I say in town, I mean South Bombay, which is not where the film industry is situated anyway, but that's where most of the film critics used to live around that area. In any case, so they would be at Famous Studio, which is in Mahalakshmi, which is far away from where the film industry is, which is obviously Bandra onwards, northwards from Bandra. Now there would be what, 5 people, 6 people. So I used to be the film critic for Midday back then. There would be one person from the Times of India. There would be one person from Afternoon, which was another newspaper here in Bombay. Maybe 3, 4 other people, 6, 7 other people. That's it, right? And it would be a small room, and that's it. And regardless of how big that film is. Okay, so if it's a really huge film, then you may have to put in a 20-seater, 30-seater cinema, you might have to put chairs on the side because those who don't usually review films, they may want to watch it, and they could be editors of those magazines or newspapers or whatever it is, whatever publication that they're part of. But this is
And roughly
practically
what time are
free,
we talking about, Mike?
roughly around 2003-4,
Okay.
right? And from there now, when we have a film, and I'm only talking about Mumbai, and of course Mumbai, I'm presuming, has the most number of movie critics so far as Hindi cinema is concerned anyway, and perhaps even Hollywood. I mean, they book the biggest theater, like the biggest screen in a PVR or something, and it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who show up, and they're all in their own right movie critics. I mean, by which I mean, or movie reviewers, by which I mean that they look at cinema and they comment on it, and they perhaps write pieces too, or perhaps they do videos or whatever it is. And so I'm looking at, I find that that change hugely satisfying personally. Because when I started out, and because there were such few film reviewers, and no one had any information on the film until its release in any case. So the reviews have become far more important than they needed to be, in the sense that there was too much pressure to get it right in terms of whether someone should watch a film or not. Because that's really what people wanted to know. Because there was no other avenue of getting that information on a Friday morning, right? So you would pick up your Times of India, or if you're in Bombay, you would pick up your Midday and just open it. It's 2 stars. Oh my God, it's a shit film. Now nobody needed to read that in any case, because that's the information they were looking for, and it turned film reviewing, at least to me personally, and I was way too young. I was just starting out as someone who decides on your behalf, right? Whether you should watch something or not, or in a sense is attempting mind control, or because you should not catch this, because that was never the intention for me to be a film reviewer in the first place,
It's not
right?
about the
But it
influence, right?
at all whatsoever. So, but it became by default that job because there was no information that people had on the Friday morning. And thankfully, with that many websites, with those many social media handles, to a point where there are far more film reviewers now than there'll ever be filmmakers. There's far more opinion that goes into what has been made than the number of people who will actually put together the film. Which is great because then it allows someone who treats, who does not see this role as primarily a consumer's role in the sense of don't go to this restaurant, don't eat this food, whatever. That's what consumers do, right? I mean, go to Zomato and say this is shit, this is 1 out of 4, this is crap, or this is great 4 out of 4, and you take an aggregate and probably go to the restaurant or you'll go to that hotel or things like that. There is space for that and that needs to exist. And that does now for films, which is fabulous because then I can just write about, respond to a film as any other piece of writing. It could be a travel story. It could be a food review. It could be a profile in the same way a review is me emotionally responding to a film. And while you will get a sense that I did not personally like that film, but if you read properly, you may actually realize that all those things I didn't like it for, you may actually like it for. So you'll actually go see the film because, this guy did, but this is there. And I don't like it, but you will go for it. I mean, the same reasons I may not have liked a film, you may actually do if you read. So it's a conversation between two people, which is what a film review should be. And I'm glad that it's reached that. And there are lots of really good film reviewers, I think. Let's not confuse those people who just like putting out stuff on their social media handle with film reviewers. I think film reviewers over a period of time put in a lot of work in order to be taken seriously. And I think we have quite a few of them now.
Yes, I agree. I think there is certainly some of the young guys who are doing a great job at writing, especially for some of the online portals.
True.
Now, we're increasingly getting polarized, especially on the social media. I do get this feeling that even some of the people who are middle of the road, they're somehow kind of tempted into going towards the polls. And it's so difficult to manage objectivity when you're, trying to, in such a polarized environment. As a critique, how important do you think it is to manage your objectivity and kind of checking your politics at the door?
Well, frankly, if you're just talking about film per se, and it's always been a thumb rule for me, and maybe it comes out of some strange sort of phobia of its own, where I watch a film and until I've reviewed it, I don't talk about it. I make sure that there is nothing I've read about it, so that what I put out is the most, in its most distilled form, exactly what I feel, because that's really what someone's reading anyone for, is your opinion, not somebody else's. And there is no right or wrong about opinion anyway. So there is that element. But I mean, the moment you bring in social media, I think Himanshu, I find social media to be a bit of a trap. And I think the trap here is that it sort of feeds off on likes, shares, and responses. And inevitably, regardless of what you're saying, if you take a polarized view on any subject on social media, you are likely to get far more retweets, likes,
you're going to
comments,
max responses, right?
Yes, and it can become a drug of its own, where it becomes a personality type for certain people to always take, viewpoints which are contrarian by nature, or ideally contrarian by nature, because then you'll have trolls, then you'll have, and I'm presuming that just becomes fun for a lot of people, or a way of life for a lot of people. It certainly brings them a huge number of followers. And I think that would also be a death trap for opinion in any form. I don't think opinion can always be one or the other. And I just don't say this about films, because I also cover media hugely, or pop culture hugely. That's where my interest in films comes from anyway. And that's one of the things one observes, is the fact that you have to fit into a bracket. And everyone tries to fit you into a bracket. And there are two brackets fighting with each other. So, you're a libtard fighting against a bhakt, and while you could have certain left-leaning liberal values, but you could actually agree with the Bhakt on lots of other things. But that there is no accounting for that. There's no space for that. And a Bhakt maybe God knows whatever his viewpoints may be on a lot of things that everyone else in his group may agree with, but there may be a lot of things that he thinks about on other issues that may actually agree with the libtard, but there's no space for that. And I don't think social media is ready for any nuance whatsoever. So I personally don't take it very seriously. Also, being in the mainstream media, it's important for us not to be too swayed by stuff on social media because it can very easily game. There are ways of doing it. It's not so hard to trend anything. Trending doesn't mean it's the most popular subject. Trending means that you get X number of people to write the same thing at the same minute, and it goes up on the charts on Twitter. So I think it's best to leave that alone for whatever it's worth, and not take it too seriously. Not beyond the fact that there's a reason why Twitter gets its name from the twittering of birds. I mean, you can only take it as seriously as that.
It's nonstop. Yeah.
Yeah.
About that second part about managing your objectivity and your critique in terms of not just politics but also your fandom.
Well, frankly, I don't know. You mean fandom in what sense?
Well, if let's say you're reviewing a big film of a big film star that you're a big fan of, and you're certainly going to have a point of view which, if the film sucks, you might have a point of view to defend. And how do you guard against that?
No, I think Himanshu, I think it's a big lie that people don't have their biases. I think every human being has their own bias, and there are certain kinds of films that I'm biased towards, for instance, and I need to be aware of it, of course. And there's certain kind of filmmakers that I love more than others, and things like that. The important thing and the only thing to bear in mind, of course, is that one that bias does not turn into prejudice. Right, so it could be a negative bias that you're just prejudiced against. It doesn't matter. You just don't like this person. It doesn't matter what the hell that person does, and you're just pissed off. If that really begins to happen with some person in particular, I think it's best to avoid their films altogether because you should not trust your own judgment.
Right.
Second is the bias also should not get to a point where it's personal in the sense of the person being a friend of yours. You care, you're so close to the process in the sense of you're so invested in that person's life journey and their process because you're buddies. Then it's best to avoid. I'm not saying that one is incapable of being objective. Of course you are, but then why get into a situation like I wouldn't if someone was a friend, I would not review it. Not because I find myself incapable of it. I just don't trust my own judgment. I may be wrong. These things also work at a subconscious level where we think we're being absolutely fair, but we probably aren't because, it's the person that fellow is your buddy. You've grown up with a guy or things like that. Or, you spend all your time hanging with that person. You will not be able to see it in ways that you would be if you watched a film randomly on Netflix or somebody else, right? So I think one needs to guard against those two aspects. One is the negative aspect where it's turned into prejudice, and it's possible, and one has to be aware if it's become that. And second, also, if you've become too close, and I think best to stay off.
Right. Many also think it's not right to kind of tag any of the actors or producers or directors in your reviews. I don't know if I'm kind of split on that. I mean, it could be your review could be just as balanced, and you could tag people on it. But what do you think? Is that a good practice as a critique to tag people associated with that project on your reviews?
Honestly, Himanshu, because I told you I don't take social media as seriously. So these are not things that I've thought about, and so I may not have actually made a rule in my head in terms of how I would personally go about something.
Okay.
But for some reason people only seem to tag, and it's completely their wish, and please they should continue to. But they only seem to tag when when they're praising somebody, not quite when their review is negative. So I don't know how it works, but frankly, I would prefer if people just read it. But if they,
Right.
but why be
Judgmental.
and why be such a miser with praise also, man? If you really love something, why not? Yeah, I mean, what's wrong? But are you trying to suck up? I mean, I hope you're not trying to suck up. I think because as journalists we need to keep that distance where we're not groupies, and we're not part of the entourage. And I really hope that we continue to remain so. Because that's what, and again, I'm not saying it's just true for the journalism that I'm far more invested in, which is show business and entertainment or culture, as it were, or pop culture anyway. But journalism of any kind, I think the moment we become groupies, there's a problem.
Any dream interview, Mike, that you haven't been able to get a chance to do so far? Not just in India, outside India, that you would love to talk with a person, long form or short form, that you really admire and would like to know more about.
Honestly, Himanshu, that's one thing that I've learned over the years. And because, I mean, this hit list is the stuff that you watched lately. And, we tend to only interview what is quote unquote called in the newsroom, the A-listers, as it were. But I've done interviews with people who are not so famous, uh, and they have the most freaking crazy stories. I think if the idea is to listen to stories, sometimes the not so famous actually have the best stories to tell. So it's never been like, oh, I wish I could interview Steven Spielberg as against Deepak Tijori. I think Deepak Tijori would be just as much fun. In fact, he is actually a lot more fun in terms of the number of stories he has, because he was
Oh,
at some
yes.
point.
Yes. I would
You know what I
watch
mean?
Tijori's interview with Spielberg because
Oh,
I
you
would
would? Then
be
I'll definitely
participating
shoot one for you.
in
Definitely for sure.
that. Please do. You got one
You'll be
you.
surprised, to hear some of the nuggets from his life. I don't even know whether we can actually air them because they're quite crazy, quite nuts.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
all.
I think it's not so much as being in awe of someone and such great, those personalities, and I hope I get a chance to meet them and to speak to them. Of course, that element exists, and I would be lying because a whole lot of people will read a Spielberg interview, and it'll be so much fun to write as well. But I think it surprises me so often that, hey man, I didn't realize this would be so much fun, but this guy is like a dude, yeah,
Right,
so
right.
yeah, so I would hope to be surprised rather than actually go in. And a lot of times you go in, meeting somebody who you would really admire a lot, and then it's just like, you gotta be kidding me, dude. Like I don't like him at all as a person. So a lot of times, really successful people don't make such great people to chat with. I mean, for whatever reason, they don't have to be great people, also, right? So there is that occupational hazard, which I learned pretty early on. A lot of my icons got slayed, destroyed when I finally met them, and shit they said to me. And of course, I published all that shit too. So, so yeah. So I don't want to raise my hopes about any one particular person or people. But to really answer your question, I think Gulzar would be a lot of fun. I've not met him. I'm a
Hmm.
little intimidated because he's just too deep a person with so much going on in the whole surreal space, that I don't know whether I'll be able to actually put it all together into a great one-on-one conversation. Javed Akhtar is a lot easier because he's very like sharp with the words, and quick question and quick answer. He's more soundbite-ish that way. But yeah, I think Gulzar, because I've not met him yet.
Okay, Gulzar, right. It's interesting. If might digress here for a minute, I keep on thinking about this, and I always imagine what a great interview or video it would make to see, just like Jackie Shroff and Anil Kapoor sitting and chatting and not knowing that this is going to be, an interview or something, or, talk with Chunky Pandey or,
Chunky Pandey
Ravina
would be great too.
Tandon.
Yeah, yeah.
It would make such great interviews, and I'm not sure that after it's recorded and everything they would agree to air that or something.
Well,
But
to be fair to Jackie, though, I don't think he cares,
he's a good
and
sport. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
and it might just be a very non-sequitur interview, perhaps going incoherent sometimes, because that's the kind of guy he is. Um, Anil Kapoor, of course, is deeply conscious of what he's saying, but I don't know. I don't know if you managed to watch the one that I did recently with Anil in Sit with Hitlist. If you haven't, I'll send you a link. He was quite candid. Or I can certainly send you. I'll certainly send you
Is it
a
out
print
yet? I
copy
haven't
of it.
seen it on the YouTube.
I'll look for it and send it to you. I definitely have the
Oh,
print
please
or
do.
the
I would love to. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. So, but then he's an extremely conscious person, deeply conscious of his image, great with his PR. Yes, it would be great to find you know Anil Kapoor just being Anil Kapoor in the sense of not how we know him, but perhaps I don't know. Maybe he's extremely sober, somber guy. you know.
You don't know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Mike. And last, this is what I ask all of my guests. A few recommendations. What would you recommend? Relatively undersung or relatively unread book and a film or a show.
Great. Okay, so let's go one by one. I
Sure.
don't know, underrated, but I mean, the show that I'm watching currently, I don't know why people aren't talking about it, is Succession, which is an HBO series.
Great
Sort of,
show. Yes.
yes, great show. And for some reason, it didn't create the noise, or maybe it didn't here, and I'm sure it did in the US because it is an HBO series, based on, it's slightly vaguely modeled on the Murdoch family. It's on Hotstar in India. So in case somebody's interested in catching that. In terms of, did you say what else you want? A
A
book?
film and a book.
Okay, film. Well, let me go with book. I think I'll just, because we're going Murdoch, I'll stick with. I think Khushwant Singh's autobiography is one of the best I've read by an Indian. I'm just sticking to media as a theme, I'm presuming, because it just came to my mind right away. He would make for a great story to tell as well as in terms of a series, perhaps, because he's been through some big moments in India's history and being right in the middle as a journalist, as an editor, and extremely, extremely honest devil may care attitude towards his life in terms of what he has to reveal. So, Truth, Love, and a Little Malice, I think, is a fabulous, fabulous book that I hope. I think people should read, which I think is only, I think Lucknow Boy came rather close to it too, which is Vinod Mehta's book.
Yes.
Again,
Yes. I love
non-fiction. I
that
tend
book,
to
by the
read.
way. Yeah.
Yes, yes, a fabulous book. I'm glad you loved it, Himanshu. I mean, I tend to read a lot more non-fiction because I get too much fiction from shows and films all the time in any case. And there's a lot of non-fiction work, which is great. I mean, speaking of which, because we're talking cinema exclusively, I think Nasir's book is a fabulous, fabulous memoir. I don't think any Indian actor, to the best of my knowledge, I think Devanand came slightly close, but not really, has written as good a memoir as Nasiruddin Shah's book
Oh,
is.
I need to read that.
I'm,
I haven't read
you
that.
must, you must. I think you should pick it up right away.
That was great, Mike. Thanks a lot
Thank you,
for
Himanshu.
chatting so candidly about everything. And like I said, I'm really glad I got a chance to do this. And I'm hoping that we'll chat again more on some other episode about so many things I would love to talk with you.
This was great, Himanshu, and please keep tweeting. And I really have begun to enjoy your podcast. Of course, I've just heard one, and then I was getting into the second one. But keep it going, man. This is fabulous.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
I've always liked Mayank's columns and his sense of humor. Glad we could have this chat on the podcast. Here's hoping I can internalize some of Mayank's tips on going about interviews. I think there were also a lot of nuggets here for some young film journalists or aspiring film writers. So if you know someone who's a relatively young film journalist, do share this episode with them. They might find something in here which could change their perspective or help them hone their skills. If you are a film journalist yourselves, I would love to hear from you if something specific from this episode resonated with you strongly. Do drop us a comment or a message. If you like this episode and enjoy similar conversations centered around films and streaming shows, do consider subscribing to our podcast. Our podcast is now live on all major platforms. Also, please do review us on iTunes when you get a chance. It will help us out. You can follow me on Twitter at loveofcinemasf8 for podcast-related updates and my tweets on all things movies. See you next week. This is Himanshu, and like always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.